The largest voting bloc of the United Nations is no longer the Soviet bloc. It's something called the OIC, the Organization of the Islamic Conference, 57 countries, funded and organized by Saudi Arabia, who were behind the scenes every step of the way on this Danish cartoon business. 11 Muslim diplomats immediately wrote to the Danish embassy demanding, to the Danish prime minister, demanding an apology, or hell would come. And indeed, they were the ones who whipped this up. At the United Nations, the OIC has passed a resolution criminalizing defamation of religion. Now, what religion do you think they're talking about? Do you think that the OIC is cracking down on anti-Semitism in the Muslim press? No, I don't think so. Do you think they're coming to the aid of the Vatican, going after Dan Brown and his unreadable novels? No, they're not. They are cracking down on Islamophobia, which is defined by them as anything critical of radical Islam. They have a full-time censorship surveillance database they call the Islamophobia Observatory. They are making lists and checking them twice of people who are critical of Islam. And they are trying to force through into member countries other laws, such as the one I was charged under. Now, I won't leave time for questions, but let me tell you the wording of the law under which I was charged. As you can imagine, in 900 days I got to memorize it. The wording of the law under which I was charged is the law of Alberta. It's also the law of BC. It's also the law federally under the Canadian Human Rights Commission. There are 14 human rights commissions in Canada, one in every province, territory, and federally. Collectively, they have a budget of about $200 million tax dollars a year, and they employ about 1,000 people. They are an industry. And like any industry that sucks at the teeth of the taxpayer, they have an interest in perpetuating themselves. Call it empire building, call it mission creep, call it inertia, Newton's law. It is not easy to pull out a weed with 200 million roots. The law in BC, in Alberta, and federally, is thus. It is against the law to publish anything, quote, likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. Likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. Likely to means maybe. Maybe in the future. Future tense conditional. Maybe you're going to do something. Really? That's not I did something and I'm in trouble, but I might do something. We have a few maybe crimes in our criminal code, future tense crimes. For example, uttering a death threat. I'm going to kill you. Well, that's sort of a future crime, right? But it has to be credible and imminent and terrifying for the police to act. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to kill you. You have to be so terrifying and convincing that the person feels they are in imminent harm. So we have a few future tense crimes in the criminal code, but likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt, those are feelings. Hatred and contempt are feelings. I was charged with doing something that maybe could possibly in the future expose someone to someone else's feelings. Well, how would I plead other than guilty? Is there anyone in this room who has not maybe done something that possibly could be interpreted as exposing one person to another person's feelings? Hatred. This is a hatred and contempt. I don't want to be full of hatred or contempt, but if I never feel hatred or contempt in my life, I am not normal. Hatred and contempt are normal parts of the human personality. Is there anything in politics, in sports even, in comedy, in art, and these days even in the weather, that doesn't evoke feelings of love and hate, contempt and respect? If you do not watch Schindler's List and leave with feelings of hatred or contempt, if you can't see the image of 9/11 happening without feeling hatred or contempt, you're not normal. So don't tell me that it is now against the law to evoke feelings of hatred or contempt. And if it was possible to pass a law to ban those feelings, we would have enacted the Love Each Other Act of 2009 and be done with this whole hate business. But unfortunately, man is not perfect. We are flawed. And one part of being a human being is to overcome hate and be constructive about it and not act on it in a violent way. Our criminal code does indeed deal with hate if that hate manifests itself in crimes, in violence, in hurting someone. Throw me in the clink if I cause someone to incite someone to violence. Likely to cause a riot. Sure, fine. But likely to expose a person to feelings? That's a crime in Canada. A crime in Saudi Arabia? Fine. A crime in Pakistan? Fine. A crime in communist China? Fine. A crime in the former Soviet Union? A crime on Saturday Night Live? Fine. But a crime in Canada? No wonder, until this year, they had a 100% conviction rate. This law was passed in 1977 federally. In 32 years, not a single person was acquitted. How could you be? You, sir, are guilty of likely exposing someone to hatred or contempt. I didn't do anything. Didn't say you did. Gotcha. I said you might. Gotcha. So how are you going to plead innocent to that? But by the way, it's not just this disgusting idea of censoring feelings. It's the processes. Now, let's say I was accused of, I don't know, murder. Something like that. If I didn't have enough money to hire a lawyer, what would be given to me? You don't have to be a lawyer to know that. You just have to watch Law and Order to know you get a free lawyer if you're poor. Not so at Human Rights Commissions. More than 90% of people charged with this hate speech offense are too poor to have lawyers, and they go in their own. Maybe that's another reason there's a 100% conviction rate. I went to an interrogation, and you saw my video that I took a video camera in there. 800,000 people watched that interrogation. I said to my lawyer, do I have to go to this interrogation? I mean, really? He said, no, they don't have the legal power to summon you, but if you don't go to them, they will come to you. Look at Section 23 of the Act, Ezra, my lawyer said to me. The human rights officers in Alberta, and I'm sure it's the same in BC, I'd have to check the statute to give you the exact section, have the right to enter my office at any time they see fit and take anything, any document, any hard drive, a sample of anything, and look in any place without a search warrant. Oh, wow. Now, again, you don't have to be a lawyer to know. You just have to watch Law and Order, that if a cop comes into your house and says, give me your hard drive, you can say, search warrant, please, or you, sir, are trespassing. Put down my computer, sir, or you, sir, are the thief. You have basic rights. A man's home is his castle, except if you're a publisher charged with hate speech. I did not have the power to keep these human rights officers out of my office. And if you're in a business whose central asset is your hard drive, well, you better go to that interrogation, oughtn't you? Anyways, I did go, and I was asked questions about my religious views and my political views, something that I don't think the government of Alberta has any right asking me. But, you know, they had a question that I knew, I thought a little bit about it in advance, and the first question I knew they would ask is, why did you publish cartoons? It's the first question I was asked on every TV show, and I actually have an answer. As you heard, it took me about 20 minutes to tell it to you. I love explaining why I ran the cartoons, but I'm trying to convince you it's the right thing to do. I am trying to be reasonable and entertaining or whatever. But when the government summons you on pain of a penalty and asks you that question, I don't think you can answer the same way, can you? Because you're not it's not a conversation on the street where you're trying to make a point. It's a conversation under duress. And if you give the wrong answer, you're in trouble. Otherwise, why would you be asked the question? If it had no bearing on your legal outcome, why would you be asked it? So when I was asked, why did you publish the cartoons, there was an implication there's a right answer and a wrong answer. And you'd better be bloody reasonable and convincing, because if you get the wrong answer, fines and perhaps even imprisonment. I should tell you, the very first person charged with this offense in 1977 was a Canadian-born Nazi. I can tell you, so go to tangent for a minute. His name was John Ross.